This conference will now be recorded.
Traffic somewhere. I live up, more toward Fauquier County and Stafford.
Oh,
Today, I made it here in half an hour, which was unbelievable. I can't even drive down here for coffee in a half an hour usually. Yeah, I was really lucky. I had to outmaneuver some reckless driving.
oh, okay.
There was a guy in front of me, reckless driving. He was dodging in and out of cars coming down 17, which is so dangerous.
We'll go ahead and start the meeting while Rupert walks in. So I'll call the meeting to order.
Roll call.
Please.
Roll call from the city of Fredericksburg, Dave McLaughlin.
Here.
Joshua Brock,
Present.
John Castellarin.
Here.
Matthew Rowe.
Here.
Tricia sorry, I'm gonna say it wrong first time, Encarnacion.
Ignacian.
You see her online?
She's not online.
She's not online, okay.
It is Encarnacion, not there.
Okay. From Spotsylvania County, Neil Holleran. From Caroline County, oh, you're okay, Ken Pogue. Mike Hoyt,
Hey, Ruby.
Justin Snow. From Stafford County, Dave Schwan,
Here.
Glenn Goldsmith. Matthew, is he online? Glenn?
No.
Kara Durant. She's not on either? No. Henry Sharpenberg.
Here.
From King George County, Rob Gates.
Here.
At large, Larry Gross.
Doesn't he usually come in, Dave?
Yeah.
Larry, yeah.
Rupert Farley.
Here.
Dustin Savage.
Here.
And Rodney Thomas.
Here.
And we do have a quorum.
Okay, we got, looks like all the Fredericksburg people here, so we can approve whatever we want, Fredericksburg.
That's got to be a first, hasn't it?
Say that out loud. Okay, so let's decide. We need to approve does anybody need to change anything on the agenda before we have to approve? Okay.
Agenda.
Rupert moves, second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? True. Old business, I do not have any old business, unless I'm forgetting something. Emma?
I don't think so.
Okay, we'll go to, we got proof in there. Get that, all right. Okay, does everybody have a chance, I hope they had a chance to look at the meeting minutes. Anybody have any changes that they need to suggest we make to the minutes? Problem with it?
Move approvals of minutes.
Second.
Okay, before you vote, in an item like this, if you weren't here at the last meeting, then you would abstain. Otherwise approve or not. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain. Savage.
Oh, here, can they just say their names? We've got Matthew over there doing computer and minutes, so and there's a lot of unfamiliar faces. So the abstains were.
And Shufflewood.
Okay. Oh, you
Dustin
got it?
Savage
Okay.
abstains.
You're more clever than I am. Okay, item number 6 is the review then of the policy.
Okay, so if you recall at our last CTAC meeting, we had a Fred Transit representative here answering questions. Hi there. Answering questions about the Fred parking lot project that they were asking to have included in the SAMPO Transportation Improvement Program, which is a planning document that programs transportation projects to receive federal funding in the region for the next 4 years. And so Fred was asking the policy committee, the decision-making committee, to approve an amendment so that their parking lot project could be put into the list and move forward to get that federal funding. Several CTEC members had submitted public comment before the policy committee took action on the amendment. And your comments were provided to the policy committee at a public hearing at the last policy committee meeting. So committee members heard your concerns. There was also one member of the public who also expressed concern. All the public comments did express concerns, none expressed support. So the committee really did ask the Fred Executive Director, Jamie Jackson, some questions about the project. Was there a need for it, which you all had pointed out in your comments. And what Fred said, basically in summary, was that this was a project that had been identified prior to anyone who's leadership for Fred now, recognizing that there is an opportunity to acquire some land. It may or may not be used for the parking lot. It may be used for something more of a multimodal and mixed use. It's being conceptualized right now. They don't have any exact identified funding other than the general breakdown of federal, state, and local funds. So the policy committee said, okay, with that in mind, seeing that you don't have these exact details any longer in your minds with the current leadership at Fred, we're going to go ahead and approve the amendment, add it into the plan, as long as we can revisit this once funding is identified. So that's what happened with that. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, very, very good. Because it was confusing.
Yes, it was.
Between our meeting and that meeting.
Yes.
Perfect.
One interesting fact that came out of there, I forgot to mention, OmniRide, they operate commuter buses in North Stafford and head into Northern Virginia. Someone did ask, the policy committee member did ask, would it be possible if a parking lot was built by Fred there, that OmniRide buses could come down further south into Fredericksburg? Right now, they only go into Northern Stafford, and bring commuters from Fredericksburg all the way to Northern Virginia. OmniRide was at the meeting and they said, yeah, we might be open to that. And Fred said, yeah, we might be open to that. So that's something that might happen, might not. What else? They also at the meeting approved the appointment of one of our new CTAC at-large members, Rodney Thomas. And then they moved into a closed session to discuss a consulting contract topic. Subsequent action was taken when they came back into open session to allow Campo staff to award on-call consultant contracts. So that's what the closed session was about, if you saw that and were curious. And that's summary of the policy meeting.
Very good. Okay. Public comment period. I don't see anybody here for public comment, but Tara walked in. Let's see Tara.
Hello.
Okay. We do have one, there might be somebody online. Is anybody online who would like to make a public comment at this time?
Dr. Gates is online, I think.
Who is?
Gates,
Oh, Roger.
right, Dr. Gates. From King George.
Anybody want to make a comment? All right, we have one written
Yeah,
public comment.
we have one written, it's about 2 pages, so let me set the timer real quick. We've got a 3-minute limit here.
And we have in our package.
Need a speed reading?
Yeah, I'm gonna speed read it, he'll probably run out of breath, but it's also in your packet in full.
Tamara Banks would also like to make a public comment.
Oh, okay, we can jump to Tamara then first.
Wasn't this in the agenda?
Package.
Yes, yeah, it also is in your packet.
So there's no need to read it then.
The policy would be to read what we can in 3 minutes. The individual who submitted it has a disability preventing her from being in person to read it, so we were gonna read it on her behalf.
Correct.
But it's printed knowing that we'll never get through it all in 3 minutes.
There's really nothing controversial in that letter. It's a very well written. And is there anything anybody disagrees with?
The point is that there might be members of the public who are listening at the
Yeah,
meeting, the meeting
yeah.
will be recorded, and we will read the minute of the letter
Okay.
as much as 3 minutes will allow.
Sure.
I assume that everybody's read this already, so I think it's kind of redundant to go through it again.
For the public portion to hear out loud, correct? We read out
Yeah.
loud, that's why, yeah.
People that are dialed in or,
So,
for the record, you could do a summary, couldn't you?
Yeah,
Just hit the the high points.
Mr. Chair, do you want to let Tamara online speak first, or do you want me to go ahead and read the comment? We do have a member, or not Tamara, not Tara. So we do have a member of the public online.
Yeah, no, we need to read it, and at the last couple of seconds, when we start running out, we'll get to 3 minutes and just do a real quick summary of the last little bit. We need to read it.
Okay, so I'll read it and then we'll come back to Tamara.
Yes.
Okay, this is from Jane Leeds, a Fampo resident. She writes, "This advisory is specific to what is needed in our region to remove barriers and obstacles to our transportation system, making it accessible and safe for those who are physically disabled. This is just the beginning. Plus, it is extremely important that all accommodations and related equipment be regularly checked and well maintained to keep them viable, accurate, and in working order. The latter serve no purpose if they are not usable and left that way for long periods of time. Replacement parts and supplies should be purchased and stored for immediate use when needed. The latter is a big part of the frustration that challenged passengers face. Getting to work, school, and medical appointments in a timely and consistent manner is necessary to keeping their jobs, pursuit of studies, and medical treatments." Her points on the advisory: 1, sidewalks should be made contiguous with existing residential neighborhoods near all bus routes to allow safe access to bus stops and to allow passengers to wait on a solid cement slab platform suitable for wheelchairs, sloped access to curbs if needed. 2, new sidewalks in identified areas that do not provide a safe paved, not on the roadway access to transit stops and or stations should be created for pedestrians with or without guide dogs. Those using walkers and wheelchairs can't afford or able to drive a vehicle to provide safe egress. Special attention should be afforded to designated retirement and 55+ communities. Number 3, safe and easy access via sidewalks to adjoining businesses, medical offices, hospitals, public libraries, social services, etc. This should include large parking lots with laddered and posted crosswalks. 4, audible signals: walk, don't walk, at frequent intervals on streets and or busy intersections requiring transit passengers who need to cross streets, train tracks, VRE, Amtrak station parking lots to access their stops in order to continue their trip or return to their point of origin. 5, at transit centers and unmanned stations, all safety-related and directional signage should be accessible on the top portion of a bench on both sides of the track, where a blind person can read its braille messages. Service dogs for the blind are taught to find a seat, thereby allowing the blind person to find the messages attached to the bench. This accommodation should be advertised via an audio announcement, particularly at unmanned stations for Amtrak. 6, all announcements should have an LED readout in English and Spanish for deaf passengers at all local transit centers, relating to arrival, departure, train track numbers for the latter. Emergency or interruption in service messages should also be read there and delivered in a timely way. 7, for those passengers that cannot access transit due to equipment failures of bus lifts, leaning bus hydraulics, failed diversion plans, etc., should be offered by authorized transit personnel free taxi service to their destination. And we are out of time. And again, the full comment is in your packet. And so we have Tamara Banks online to speak.
Okay, well, let me say just one thing about this. So if anybody from the public is listening in or listens to this meeting because it's recorded, you can look at it later. The package, at the FAMPO package where the agenda is, under public comment received, the full text of the letter is posted there so anyone can read the full text. Thank you. So, yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tamara Banks. I'm from Healthy Generations Area Agency on Aging. I am their travel trainer. I just want to ask the committee that within the next couple of months, that everyone gets out and ride our public transportation service. It's vital and it's important for everybody to get out and utilize the service, just so we can see what our underserved and our disabled community goes through when having to ride public transportation. Now, it's not just for transit, but it's also the VRE, it's also Amtrak. And again, I'm always preaching about informed decisions. In order to do that, we got to become the public. I ride the bus. I've had colleagues ride the bus. We've even started to get some of our politicians to ride the bus. I would like to be a part of a committee and organization that really knows what the people are going through. When we talk about accessibility, when we talk about price, how much the bus costs, because that is concern with some of the people that I actually travel train. So if everybody could just go and ride the bus, you can email me. My contact information, Ms. Fink has. I really would like to know all of your opinions on the challenges that you see when riding the bus. It's important because as we go further into this pandemic, as we come out this pandemic, people are going to be looking for ways to get out. We have a beautiful, beautiful ballpark, but people can't get to the ballpark by the bus because the bus does not come nowhere close to it. We have all these great businesses that downtown Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, Stafford, that a lot of people can actually go work at, but the bus is not accessible to them. So I would just like for everybody to experience that. It's not easy doing that. And I know a lot of you can say, hey, I could jump in my car, but please think about those that cannot jump into a car or do not have friends or family that could take them anywhere. Or the fact that a lot of the people that we represent just physically, mentally cannot use a vehicle, or it's too expensive to use a vehicle. I am the travel trainer, and I'm asking all of you to please at least give me a call so I can talk to you about the challenges that are facing and maybe give you guys travel training so you can understand why travel training is so important in our region.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else from the public who needs to speak at this time? All right. Hearing none, I'll close the public comment hearing. There is another one at the end of the session for anything that comes up during the meeting the public would like to speak to.
Chair, Mr. Chair, could I just make a suggestion? The letter that was read out, could we send a copy of that letter formally from your committee to VDOT and VRE? There's some comments there about sound messages of the train stations and so on. And because they have control of roads and of the train station and the trains, maybe they could pay attention to some of those pieces.
Thank you. Great idea.
If the committee is amenable to that. It's up to you.
Take that one. Sounds good. Yeah. All right. Because there's a lot of very specific what has been presented. Okay. This is going to be very interesting, George. We're going to do a little education, especially for new people. People are new to CTAC. It'll be helpful. So I'm looking forward to it. So I'm really excited to see this on.
Yeah, thank you. So Stacey brought this idea to me just to get a little bit more information about how we create and then implement transportation projects. So I put a little, where do they come from, where do they go, this little humor in there. And then on the next slide, we talk about the typical transportation project pipeline. So we start as a study. And so a study can be done through a bunch of different means. And then that study develops specific recommendations to the area that was being studied. Recommendations are incorporated into local and regional plans. And then funding is applied for to implement that recommendation. So if you go to the next slide, we'll start with talking about different studies. So one of the studies that is run by the Virginia Department of Transportation, also known as VDOT, is called the STAR Study Program. So it's a comprehensive and innovative way to find transportation solutions that relieve congestion and solve critical traffic and safety challenges. That's the main theme of what this study aims to find solutions to. There's VDOT project pipelines, which is a area roadway. Yeah, go ahead.
Could you give us an example of each as you go through? Does it help us understand?
So I'm not. Yeah, Matt.
I mean, one of them being, I'm sure you've all heard over the past few years, Route 3 STAR study was one that was done a couple years ago, and there's been a few smart store projects that come out of that. Basically, it was to study roadway improvements between I-95 and, I guess, the Fredericksburg line, the Rappahannock River. There's just targeted roadway improvements for that study, and they come out of come into several smart growth projects at this point that you've all have certainly heard of and seen before. You may not know you've seen it or heard of it, but certainly you've seen it before.
Yeah, and then I have a PowerPoint presentation that has links to all these different sources. So Stacy can send that out, and in the notes section at the bottom is specific links to each type of project, study, or funding source. So if you want to gather more information that way, we can send that out as well, and you can look in the present for news section. So VDOT pipeline studies, there's actually 6 of them going on right now, 2 in Stafford, and then I think 3 in Spotsylvania, / the city, and then 2 in the city. I think that's the breakdown. Then there's also ways that we can have regional studies.
So what's an example of the pipeline?
So in North Stafford, from almost the border down to, what is it, Telegraph?
Exit 140, 146.
Yeah, that's the courthouse.
Farther than that. Garrisonville Road.
Oh,
So 143 maybe?
Yeah.
Parkway.
yeah, there's also a Centerport Parkway study that
Yeah.
is the Centerport region from like the Centerport Parkway exit north into, yeah,
Towards Farmington.
yeah. So there's 2 studies listed for regional studies. That's something that the FAMPO staff would apply for and then complete, working with consultants as necessary. There's 2 examples on here, Lafayette Boulevard, that has been going on and it's continuing to happen. There was a transit and then a roadway portion. And then the east-west mobility study, which will be starting soon, and had initial stakeholder meetings, and that's based on grants from VRPT, local match, and other funding sources. And then a city, locality, county planners, along with their consultants, can do any projects in their locality, so any specifics in the county. And then, how are these recommendations developed? So who decides what solutions are implemented? So after the study is complete, there's a list of a ton of different options. The example I have on the side is a Route 1 STAR study that was completed. The entire study covers 51 different recommendations. So this is just one intersection at Route 1 in Cowan Boulevard. This one intersection has 6 improvements alone. So how do you know which ones to implement? Should you do all 6, 3, however many? So most of the time, it's the board that commissioned the study that will approve or adopt the recommended list of things to move forward with, to construction, to further planning, to right of way. And so like examples of groups that could approve this is a locality board, a stakeholder group, the FAMPO policy committee, and any transit agency. Pretty much whoever requested the study makes the decisions on what improvements to implement. And then the next slide. So once these studies are recommended and chosen to move forward with, the best approach or plan of action is to incorporate them into our regional and local documents. So each jurisdiction has a comprehensive plan, and there's a transportation element of that plan that has a list of proposed needs and projects that they're planning to implement in the timeline of their comprehensive plan. So you want to incorporate that recommendation into their plan, along with FAMPO documents, such as our long-range transportation plan, which covers 20+ years and includes all current and future projects that will receive federal funding. And then our short-term document, which is the TIP, that covers 4 years, and it includes all of the projects funded by FHWA, FTA, and other regionally significant projects. And so those are 3 simple ways to get these recommendations included, so then we can apply for funding. So on the next slide is the basic process of how to apply for funding. So the board as a regional body selects these improvements to submit to any funding source. So then the staff or whoever is appropriate prepares the application to submit, getting all the information, the engineering and planning sketches, cost estimates, things like that to apply. And then the projects are selected from the funding program through their decision-making body. And a lot of times that's the Commonwealth Transportation Board or just the state's version of a policy board. And one note about this is that it's based on the FAST Act, which is the current legislative framework for all federal funding. But this is currently in the process of being amended, and a new act is going to be implemented, which is called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and this will have new surface transportation bill, which will have new guidelines to how to receive funding from federal agencies. So on the next slide, it's just a bunch of examples of various funding sources. So the main buzzword on here is Smart Scale. Everyone has heard of Smart Scale. It's the state's way to give transportation funding, and everyone thinks that that's the only way to get funding. There are so many different ways that you can get funding through state, local, federal sources. For example, the RAISE Act. That was something that Spotsylvania just recently applied for a few projects for that funding bucket. CMAQ and STBG, those happen on an annual cycle, and FAMPO allocates the dollars for that. Smart Scale, which I mentioned, was from the state. I-95 and 395 commuter choice. The 5307 urban area formula funding. Revenue sharing, transportation alternatives, which is specifically for bicycle and pedestrian improvements, so no roadway capacity increases. Highway safety improvement and state of good repair for things such as bridges or structures that are deficient that need to be replaced is a specific way you would use state of good repair money. And there's also so many more. So these are just a few examples of ways that you could get funding. And that's the last slide I have on this, but I can take any questions about the general process and what it would typically look like to make these projects into projects from a study.
Are signalization improvements included in this as well, like no build options for, resynchronizing traffic signals?
Yeah, that would definitely be something that could be studied. So instead of having a project that increases capacity by adding lanes, you could have a signal optimization project, which would look at synchronizing all the signals so that they would be green so that you could travel through corridors easily without any additional congestion. So things like that would definitely be a recommendation from the study.
Yeah, and if I can add that just a little bit, just give you a quick example, related to Smart Scale, for instance, I think the number 2 project in the past round of Smart Scale for the whole state of Virginia was, I think, a transit signal optimization project. So I don't know the details of the project exactly where it was, but I remember that from looking through it. So they can score well on certain places, and a lot of these districts actually do have signal optimization projects.
Yeah.
If I understand your slide correctly, FAMPO is the button for regional studies approaches. Who within FAMPO, or how does FAMPO prioritize, and obviously their ability to conduct studies is limited by resources, i.e. money?
Right. So we would apply for specific grants to conduct a study. So even before we get to any recommendations, we have to apply for funding to conduct a study. Like recently, we got money from DRPT, from 5303, and other sources to conduct this east-west mobility study. So in the regional sense, we look at things that are applicable to the region as a whole and funding sources through that. And specifically for Smart Scale, as an example, FAMPO gets 4 applications into the funding process, and GWRC also gets 4 applications into the funding process. But also each locality and transit agency gets applications of their own. So if there's a project that goes through multiple jurisdictions or is on a roadway that is regionally significant, we would apply on behalf of the localities to say this is a regional project. We want to support this, and we'll apply for funding in that manner.
Well, who provides the money?
So for Smart Scale would be the state. For CMAQ and STBG.
That was my next question, was who's funding all these?
Yeah, so some of them are state, most of them are federal. So it kind of depends which one.
If I can just drill down a little bit, the
Yeah.
east-west mobility study,
Yeah.
who paid for that?
So several different sources paid for that. DRPT, which is a state, paid for the transit, like transit planning, like planning routes. They paid for a portion of our transit area of that study. Then we have 5303 funding, that's federal funding. Then we have local match funding, so from the localities. And then the last source was the most recent, it's called HIP, I can't remember the,
It's
Highway.
No. it's HIP.
The Highway Improvement Program, which is also federal money.
Right, and that was most recently awarded, but that's not a consistent funding source, so it's not something we can rely on every year to allocate. So we just got money this past year and allocated that to the study for the East-West mobility.
So on, I'm sorry, you want to go? On these applications, localities can apply for this and FAMPO
Yes, so
for each one of these?
not for each one of them. For example, for CMAC and STBG, we as FAMPO would receive applications from the localities. So we would score, screen, and then suggest applications to receive funding, and then that would be approved by the policy board. For example, Smart Scale, regional and local bodies can apply to that, and that would be approved by the state.
The general, sorry, and just add that the general trend is that FAMPO applies for funds which FAMPO needs internally to pay staff salaries or to pay for studies or to pay consultants. The rest of the funding, which is the most of the funding you'll ever hear about, is funding which is allocated to FAMPO by both federal and state bodies, which sometimes has a local match that is obligated to the local jurisdictions. That's the bulk of the money that comes in, and that money is, we get it annually on a regular basis. The amounts vary depending on the economic environment of the year in which it occurs. And FAMPO's only role in that, for most of that money, is to allocate it to projects. So effectively, we are the regional body that tries to get the jurisdictions to work together to agree the allocation of all of that funding. The bulk of what you see there in front of you is funding that comes out from outside, and all we do is decide, do we build a road in Stafford, or do we build a bus route in Spotsylvania, or do we build a bike path in Fredericksburg? That's what FAMPO does in terms of the funding system. Our main job is really to just coordinate all of your localities to agree on how to spend that money. And we use formulas, we use data analysis, we use all kinds of things to come to an agreement as to what the best use of the funding is. So that's to get into each one of those, Jordan or Matthew or Stacey or I could spend an hour on each one of those funding streams. They're all very complicated, and it's taken me as the new FAMPO administrator 10 months to get up to speed on each one of those damn things. They're very complicated.
Yeah.
But the key thing is we apply for funding for our own internal needs. It's a small amount of funding. The big money goes to all of the projects in your localities, and our role is to try to get you all to agree on how to spend all that money. And that's our role, is to provide you the data, the analysis, and a prioritization methodology, which we then apply to that money, and it gives us a list of projects that your localities have all asked us to fund. And we don't actually, all we're doing, we don't in fact even receive the money in our bank account. All we do is send a list to the feds and the state and say, please fund these projects. That's all we really do. So our role is coordination to get all of your localities together to agree, and that's sometimes a difficult task because every locality wants their highway to be built, and so we got to try and find some objective way of agreeing that process. So most of my job is to try and keep the peace.
Yeah.
How's it working out?
Sometimes great, sometimes not so great.
Yeah.
One of the things that I guess I've learned here over the years is that for each of these funding sources, you have to ask yourself, who's doing the accounting of the balance in those accounts? Where's that being done, first of all? And to answer that question, I think a lot of it is done at VDOT.
Yep.
VDOT keeps track of the amounts that are available in, let's say, the state of good repair. Because I've asked them, why aren't we using state of good repair money to put shoulders on our highways out here? And it could be done, but a planner in the bowels of Stafford County government, which you folks work with all the time, is going to have to raise that issue up. And it starts there, plant the seed, and then there's a determination made, and I think it's done at the county government level. Where's the money to do it, right? There's a need, and then where's the money? So you folks and the planners in the city, same way, I believe, your city planners, informally get together and develop the plan. What's the strategy to get this to be approved by the CTB, or in the case of a local government where they're putting up matching funds, the money from one of these sources is probably already there. You just have to match it. And then the project gets approved. Am I right?
Yeah,
Did I
that's,
describe that?
yeah, that's pretty much it. Somebody starts with an idea and you work through the process of how to get that funding realistically.
And I can give you a little real world example of something that's happened this past week.
Please do.
Smart Scale, for instance, as you know, some of you know who are on the committee over the last 2 years, we had round 4, which was this past year, and we got projects funded through that. Round 5 is coming up next year. Pre-application process opens, I guess, in March, but we're starting the process early this year through FAMPO and GRC. And basically, we are sitting down with looking through our studies, working with our localities, working with VDOT. This is something we started over the past couple of months and really a lot over the past couple of weeks. Sitting down, we've had meetings with, for instance, the city of Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania County, and we're looking at what some of our projects may be that they want to have on our list. So we've worked with them on projects, for instance, for Lafayette Boulevard. We have, as Jordan mentioned, multiple studies along Lafayette Boulevard that have been done over the past few years. So kind of going through this process, where do they come from, where do they go? It starts with a study. And it started with the study of the Lafayette Boulevard, phase 1 and 2. Phase 1 was transit. Phase 2 was the highway. And phase 1 was funded through GRPT. Phase 2, I believe, was funded through, I think part of it was funded through STBG funding. And it started with the funding through that. And then we did the study a couple years ago. And then we're finishing up the second part of the study right now. And we sat down with our local planners over the past few weeks and we're like, okay, out of these studies, what projects might we want? What parts of these studies do we want to put onto a SmartStart project? So working with them, we've put together a Lafayette Boulevard multimodal improvements project that will include some sort of improvements from both of the studies that will then possibly, if our boards approve it, be applied for in SmartScale. And then hopefully, if it gets approved in SmartScale, then once that funding is allocated in SmartScale, it's a 6-year program. So the next is 2028, I think.
Yeah.
So the project delivery will start in 2028. And if those projects go through, you could see new improvements on Lafayette Boulevard by 2032, 2035. Just throwing random numbers out there, but something like that. It's a 6-10
So what do
year.
you see as the role of this group in that process?
So like Matthew said, we're the one that coordinates with the localities.
No, this group right here, not FAMPO.
CTAC
Yeah.
does the preliminary. We see what's coming out of these studies and which have been chosen by the localities. And it comes to us. And then on the way to the policy committee, basically. We're a subset of the policy committee.
See, I see a slightly different term on this. We have enough sectarianism in this process as it is. This body here could come with some kind of consensus and go back and advocate rather than just receive stuff that, I have to confess, this thing is some optimization. And without a regional perspective, we're going to spew money all over the place, and it's not really going to assist the end result. For example, I really love the turn lane on Potomac Drive, but is it as important as other stuff? No. I think it's our job as a body to go back to our respective jurisdictions and advocate for the regional solution rather than protect each municipality or locality's turf. And so that's kind of why I'm here. And I would hope that that's something we would want to do, because planners are great people, but sometimes they stay in their cubby holes and never come out and see the light of day. And there needs to be some citizen interaction in the process so that just because all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and the traffic impact study says it's doable, it may not be wantable.
It's a question of, excuse me, it's a question of ideation, right? You say it starts with a study, but that's not really true, right? It's somebody has an idea.
Before that.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, we're here, and we've got this big stack of things, and it's very, very detailed, and that's all fine. But ultimately, the question of turning the, like you say, the high-level ideation of where are some problem spots, what are the people thinking, because the ones who have the most data about what's wrong with the transportation system are the people who use it every day. And getting the data out of them is at least, you know, you got studies that you can do, you've got surveys you can do, you've got us, that's what we're here for, going back and forth between those populations. And then turning those into very specific plans with very specific details and funding structures, that's what the planners and the experts are for. I mean, I'm not a transportation expert, I couldn't do that process. So speaking to the process, I think you're exactly right, where our job is much more in the early part, where, you know, where it's a study or even pre-study. And of course, we can be involved at every point of that process, but ultimately we're sort of not in the business of doing a whole lot of detail work.
So could I just add one sentence to that? I think you're all actually correct. Nobody's idea here that I've heard so far isn't actually correct. It's just matching those ideas into a usable system. The one sentence I would add is the policy committee ultimately will vote on any funding. And so you have a significant role, and I try to emphasize this with your current chairs, to advise that policy committee to make good decisions. Yeah. And so I personally, as the new head of the staff team, would welcome resolutions from time to time coming from this body to the policy committee to say, we would really support the following thing. It's difficult to do that on 100 different items every month, but if you found a particular thing that you were passionate about and you felt on behalf of citizens that you interact with and yourselves that this is the thing that the policy committee should drive, you should pass a resolution to send the resolution to the policy committee and say, we would really like you to support this particular project or this investigation or this study or this funding source or whatever the heck it is. And you do have that role to advise the policy committee before they make a decision and vote on something. So I would encourage you, and that's why we bring you all these documents before the policy committee sees them usually. Because you may want to say, well, we don't actually agree with line 5. Mm-hmm. Now, it's difficult to do it on every item because we'd have chaos, but sometimes from time to time you will see something which you feel as a group, you feel strongly about, and I would encourage you to then say, we officially vote to say to the policy committee, can you please pay more attention to this or that or whatever it is.
I will say, to say again, I've been here about 2 years now, and we did do, the one time I can remember we did that kind of as a whole group, we all came in and said, this is something we care about and people we talk to and our constituencies care about, was the plan to save money by reducing the frequency of state inspections. And we all kind of thought that was not a great, not unanimously, but overwhelmingly, we thought we should maintain the regularity. We had buy-in from the police, we had buy-in from various news and media sources. And when we brought that to the policy committee, we kind of got told, you know, whatever the governor wants is kind of what's already going to happen, sort of thing.
Yeah, well, that's the reality.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I get that. I'm not necessarily saying that doesn't have its place, but there is a sense in which I guess I would like a formal process where we could sort of get an official, like, was it the White House, if you have enough signatures on a petition, they have to have some kind of response. I would like that as a citizen.
Well, I think we do that as a matter of our due diligence here. But I can remember, and I think Dave, you may remember this. Remember Guy Gormley when he said the left turn up at this Route 17 into the commuter lot needed to do away with 180-degree permission to do a U-turn there. And VDOT had it set up so that you could do 180-degree if you were turning into the lot instead of turning in. And a lot of people, because the access to businesses was not as good, we started putting these medians in the highways. So they'd go up and do a U-turn. Well, people in the morning were trying to get on the road with their carpools, and there was a conflict there. And I think they had a couple accidents at least. And Guy raised it here at this table. And he said, could we do something? Can VDOT do something, or can we get VDOT to do something? And in the end, I remember they couldn't do it, as I recall. VDOT could not change that. I don't remember the rationale.
I think all you do is synchronize it.
Yeah, synchronize the lights, exactly. And that may have been the solution that VDOT came up with. But at least it was raised here, and we discussed it. I don't know, Rupert, you should remember, maybe you've been here longer than I have. It was very interesting because it was something we could really focus on. It wasn't a list of smart scale from different jurisdictions. And I think in my experience here, we almost become jurisdictional adverse. I mean, we don't, we sit here and we tackle issues, and I don't think all the time, gee, I mean, if I'm looking at a city of Fredericksburg project, I can relate to that because I spend time down there. And I don't spend a lot of time in Spotsylvania, but at least I've been down there, but I've been around 33 years. Yeah. Well, that's another issue. Yeah, congestion. But I think from my experience, having been one of these slug liners for 12 years, in the commuter lots, and I've done buses. The only one I haven't done is the train. I think that for us as individuals on this committee, the best outreach would be to go over and walk the commuter line and talk to people. Because those people know what's going on. I don't know, I'm not sure there's others here who've been in slug lines and use the commuter lot. But people in the commuter lots know where the problems are, transportation wise. And if you know people that use the lots regularly, then you could probably, jot down their phone number, call them occasionally, try to build a contact base. And that's what I tried to do when I was chairman. I was trying to get us to, develop contacts in the community. And I was going out to businesses and talking to them, people who have trucks on the road and a fleet and, those kinds of people. And that's our way I see our job, from my view, is outreach. And we can make, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that's the missing link, is that we don't have strong enough contact with the people we represent. And you can go to a county, the county will send you a notice, hey, we're having a party, we're having something, and you'll go to that because you're a CTAC member. But that doesn't really give you the contacts that you really need. Right. You need to be like, a politician running for office. You go out and you talk to people. I had a fellow in my neighborhood, his name is Charlie Brown. That's a name you don't forget. And Charlie Brown sat for years with VDOT telling him, we're going to fix that road out in front of you because his property was being flooded every time it rained. And I'm talking 3 feet of water in his property. And it was at the bottom of his hill, so it wasn't affecting his house. So I just happened to stop by there one day and I asked him about it. I said, is anybody doing anything about what's going on? Because this is about a half mile from my house. And it was bothering me because I was afraid I was going to end up off the road because of the flooding on the highway. He said, yeah, as a matter of fact, they started, in 2008, they started a bond referendum to fix the road here, to straighten it and to improve the grade and all that. And I said, oh, really? So I came back to my supervisor, who was Gary Snellings, and I said, hey, Gary, what's the deal out on Poplar Road with that curve out there and the flooding and all that? And he goes, oh, we took care of that in 2008 with a bond referendum. I said, well, where'd the money go? Because it sure as hell didn't go to fixing the road. He said, oh, yeah, I guess we haven't. And I said, something needs to be done there. And within a year, they started the construction. But they ran out of time. with the bond referendum.
And what sort of bothers me is the other side of that coin. And that is projects that pop up on the list that nobody asked for. And I think a lot of them, maybe you can get my story straight on this, I might have it all wrong. But my impression is that if a road gets kind of crowded, the traffic picks up, it automatically gets put on a list to be widened. They're giving it an ounce of thought as to whether we really want to widen that road or not. So I feel like a lot of money goes down the drain, not to mention the environmental consequences because of roads that just VDOT, well, maybe it's not VDOT, maybe it's FAMPO, just decides, hey, this needs to be on the list because it's going from a grade C to a grade D congestion.
Well, that's sort of my point.
Well, and there's the question of integration with, say, Fred. How much influence do we have over Fred? How much information, crosstalk do we have with them? Because you're right. Instead of, our kind of focus here on something like this is what can we do to build a thing or change a thing or improve a thing, as opposed to can we take a thing we already have and say, take that money and put it into a bus and then we don't have to do those projects, every 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is. So.
Another thing is cost estimating, and that's something that we don't do.
No, we can't.
And so we can say, well, can you fix that turn lane? And VDOT will have to go back and study it and have their engineers look at it and look at the environmental aspects. There's a lot of what goes into it. And it'll be a while before you get an answer. We don't have enough money.
Dave, I think we've talked a lot about the difficulties of this.
Yeah.
You want to represent whatever specifically your section of your county, whatever. But how do you make that good connection and get good input?
Yeah.
We do all kinds of outreach. Stacy does,
Much better.
We got somebody says, hey, the curb in front of my house, or you get stuff that is just kind of so generic, it's really not operating. So we want all that. So how can we keep getting that kind of feedback better? And individually, how can, what you refer to, how can we talk to people and get stuff that comes back up here? One thing I haven't mentioned is every opportunity when VDOT has hey, we're going to have a citizen input on whatever project that's coming up, go in, because now we have some understanding. That's the other thing is we don't have the funding detail information on these. All of this gets confusing to us. We're doing this once, part-time once a month.
Yeah.
So those are another challenge. But when you go to those meetings and they say, well, we've learned a little bit now. I said, like you said, well, it doesn't make sense. We're going to have this turn go this way. Really, does that, and you can then talk face to face with the engineers.
Yes.
And you can actually have a good discussion whether that makes sense, and you're not just saying, oh, that's,
Well, they'll spend the time, they'll spend the time with you.
And it's like what other people were saying, once we've got that outreach, that connection, once we've got that information, what people want, turning it into an idea that can be injected into this process and put into the policy committee and really have a way to really agitate for those things. I think it's important. I think that's a good role.
Well, knowing your technical, the guys on the technical committee, I mean, they speak with great voice. They're professional planners
Absolutely.
at the county, the city, and everything. And so, you get them to hear from you. You can reach it. I know in the city, I could talk to her. Hey, what's about this? That's another very helpful thing. So.
I haven't done enough of that. Most of us haven't. You have.
Yeah.
You've gone to the technical committee,
Fredericksburg,
which I thought was a good idea.
Counties are much bigger.
But the technical committee, I always wondered what the heck do they really do? And then I started realizing they do a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, the technical committee.
And when I observed those meetings, those meetings a little bit to what you're saying, they don't tend to be jurisdictional.
Yeah.
They seem to work very well together, and they work about projects, and they talk about, they don't seem to be, really. Yes.
Yeah, if I could just add one thing,
Please.
the citizen outreach part of an example I gave before. I mentioned Lafayette Boulevard, and of course, some of you probably know Lafayette Boulevard is a road that has a lot of congestion. It doesn't have sidewalks, doesn't have paths through most of it, bad pedestrian, bike ped access. That first study on Lafayette Boulevard that I know of course, there might have been studies in the past, was a 2009 Lafayette Boulevard multimodal study. in 2009. This is a $300,000 study that was done by FAMPO with a consultant, and they did a massive amount of public outreach. You can go onto the study page, I think it's on our website, and look at all the public outreach and stuff that they did. They had community meetings, vision boards, all kinds of stuff. And I think that is a good example of kind of where the process started in that 2009 study. It had great ideas, a great vision for the roadway, got lost after a few years, came back to it with in the past 5 years with some more studies, and finally we're getting projects done, finally we're getting sidewalks, paths, some roadway improvements put in. So it's finally happening, but that process in a way started back in 2009 with that study, and that had a massive amount of citizen outreach and citizen participation for the beginning of that study.
But it shouldn't take that long.
Mr. Chair, I want to belabor this because I know your meeting, the time's going to run away with you and you've got a lot still to get through. But in your pack today, you've got all of the projects that are going into the long range transportation plan until the year 2050.
Yeah.
So now's the time to pay attention to that list in front of you on the table, because if the project is not in a thing called the CLRP, which is the fiscally constrained list of projects for FAMPO, it is not legally allowed to get funded. So if it's not in that big ugly spreadsheet in front of you, it's not going to get funded unless we go and amend that spreadsheet in the future to add the project. So that's quite an important list because it's 300 in total 349 projects, including the ones that are currently in the LRTP that we're leaving there, plus all of these new ones. Secondly, we have to, as FAMPO and GWRC, two different lists, produce the smart scale applications that are going in next year. But we've already gone a long way down the path of choosing the projects. All your localities have submitted suggestions. We've tried to score those projects and prioritize them in an objective way as possible. Matthew's been working on that. Jordan's been working on the LRTP list. These things are going to be decided on this month, next month, and the following month by the policy committee, the TAC, and ultimately the people at head office in Richmond, VDOT, and so on, to decide which of those projects are going to get funding. But they can't get funding if they're not in one of those two places, in that big spreadsheet for the LRTP or in those smart scale applications, which we're about to send to the TAC on Monday. On Monday, the TAC's looking at the smart scale applications for the first time. We've got a list for them to look at. But what we do is the technical work behind the scenes to produce these things, these lists. So if you want to make any changes to what's going to happen here in the next 10 years and in the next 30 years, these are the two lists you have to influence. So you've got to influence the policy committee or the TAC or a VDOT to change if you don't like what you see. So please do pay attention to these things. They're long, they're boring, but that's what gets the funding. So we do all the behind the scenes boring work to produce these things so that you can look at them and say, yeah, that looks good, or we want to change something, or whatever the case is. But please do pay attention to these, because that's a theory that you've been seeing up there that Jordan has put out for you nicely. The practice is we're going to put them into actual this turn lane, that bus route, this particular cycle lane. They're all in there. And in the smart scale applications, and those two are going to be approved shortly. So now's the time to get involved in the process, talk to your councilman, talk to your supervisor, go to the policy committee if you're really upset, make your case heard, because now's the time to argue if you don't like it. There's a lot of projects there, 349 projects that are going to be put into this constrained long range plan, which means that what that constrained long range plan means, and we'll hear about it now in the presentations, is we believe that there will be funding available to fund these projects, but no other projects. We've maxed, for those 349 projects, we've maxed out the funding we believe is going to be available, in theory, in the next 20 some odd years, until 2050. So just pay attention to
Okay,
those.
so let's do that. Unless, any questions for George before we transition? That was a good discussion of it, especially with new people. How do we make our job, we've talked about it a lot. The more we know about the process and how this stuff works is obviously a big step up, and it's not easy. We do once a month. All these projects on here, the ones out in 3950. Seriously? So you got a paragraph, you got 5 words. Kind of hard to do, especially when we ask the public, hey, give us your input, you know? It's impossible for something like that. It's a challenge, it really is. All right, so let's talk about the list itself, the project list. I will say one thing, could potentially be an action item where we send CTAC comments on the draft project list and policy.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yep.
Yeah.
So while you're absorbing this information, like the chairperson said, just think about the list and any comments you might have, you can provide after the meeting in the meeting about what the projects are. We can bring that to the policy committee. So what is the long-range plan? The long-range plan is our region's long-term transportation vision. What we're going to want our transportation infrastructure to look like in the next 20 to 30 years. There's 2 portions that contain projects. There's the fiscally constrained list, which Ian just talked about, and then general needs. So fiscally constrained is what we have assumed in our budget that can be attained in the next 30 years. And the general needs are other things that if funding becomes available, we want those next on the list to receive funding. The next slide. So last month we presented the first draft list and how we got to the list, the steps that we took to incorporate all of our previous 2045 projects and include all the new candidate projects up to the funding budget that we could. And so these are adjustments that have happened since last month. So the first adjustment was that some of the projects had overlapping highway and active transportation elements. So an example of this is that a highway project included a sidewalk in a description. However, an additional sidewalk project was applied for as an active transportation project. So this money is being counted in 2 places. So what we did was we removed the active transportation part of the highway and left just the highway and left just the active transportation as separate sections on the list. So the list contains 4 sections: highway, active transportation, transit and TDM, and then the studies. So that's how that's broken out. So nothing was removed, but just separated out by mode of transportation. Like I said, that's just to avoid the double counting of the costs and make sure we have it incorporated. Then the second thing is we wanted to include all the transportation alternatives or TAP applications that the jurisdictions were applying to in this next round of funding. So there was 2 projects, one from Stafford and one from Spotsylvania, that were not originally included on the list of the fiscally constrained list. So we counted those as scoring exceptions and incorporated them into the list because that's a need that was identified and will be applied for funding by the localities. So we added 2 active transportation projects that way. And then the last thing that we did, we adjusted the inflation rate. So we received comments from our consultant, Cambridge Systematics, about how we created our fiscally constrained list. And they gave the comment that we did not compound our interest year over year. So we applied a 2% inflation rate every year. And then they suggested to compound it. So it went to 26% and then 57% in the future years, depending when the project would be constructed. So if you go to the next slide. So these are all the projects that were selected based on what was applied for in this most recent application process. So 53 out of 56 highway projects were selected, 29 out of 76 active transportation projects were selected, 11 out of all 11 active transportation and TDM, which stands for Transportation Demand Management, and then all the preliminary engineering and general studies were included. So this note just says we funded the project if there was the budget available. If the budget was less than what was available, we just moved to the next fundable project and just went through the list that way based on the score that we created from the LRPP prioritization methodology. So we use that objective methodology to create scores and rank them highest to lowest. And then with the funding, we just went down the list and included what we could in the funding available. So if you go to the next slide, like Ian mentioned, there's 343 projects that will be included in this list, and you have that there printed out with you. You can look through it in the various sections. So it's broken down by mode on the top in the column, and then by the agency or jurisdiction or even statewide, district-wide, in the rows. And then the cumulative projects by agency, cumulative projects by mode, and then the cost estimates. So roughly, all these projects, about $3.3 billion. And so, like I said, you have that list in front of you. Stacy did receive public comments, so I'm gonna invite her up to read all the public comments. That's like you were saying, how we're getting people involved. We received 10 pages of public comments about the list and what people want us to include, change, influence, etc. So all these notes will be brought to the policy committee, and I'll turn it over to Stacy to go over them.
Yeah, so we received 9 comments, and I'm not going to, in the interest of time, read through all these. They are in your packet, but I have just very brief sentences highlighted for each one. I'm going to just go over this quickly because I think they might kind of spark a concern in your mind as you as a group talk about this list next. So the first one, this is a great example of how we do public input as FAMPO staff. So this lady wrote to us and she said that I didn't see any mention of widening of Route 2 and 17 that runs from the city of Fredericksburg past Dixon Park and down to New Post. Is the widening of this road being considered, or is an alternative route being developed? So she actually really scanned through this list very well. She did find a project that's not in there. We reached back out to her and said that Spotsylvania is still considering this project. At this time, they don't have identified funding, so they can't put it on the list. However, the list is a living document. It can always be amended, so they can ask us to amend the list in future years to include that project. That was the first comment. The next one was giving support to widening of Onville Road. And then another expression of support for an Onville sidewalk addition. This project will provide much needed relief for traffic leaving the military base and increase the safety for school bus drivers and students. That's for the roadway widening or the left turn lane addition, I guess, on Onville. And then for the sidewalk one, this is a great project to improve safety along Onville. I would ask the committee to consider extending the sidewalk further north to Garrison Wood Drive as part of this project. And he goes on to say that he's noted pedestrians crossing out of that certain area. So that's something else. If you see a particular project and you want to make sure that a sidewalk is going to be extended to a certain neighborhood, now's the time to say, hey, I don't see that in the description. Here's why I think that you should consider the sidewalk to be extended to XYZ neighborhood.
Let me ask you a question. So that was, there's several Onville Road projects in there. And so what you're saying is those specifics were not covered in these individual projects. You guys researched that? You went back there and said, because I just look at the Onville Road widening or something. I said, oh, maybe I covered that. I don't know.
Right. So I think he's looking for an exact.
Let's change the proffer that was made by CBS.
Okay.
The money and then to extend the sidewalk to Garrison Woods, is it?
Yeah. And a lot of the times that these projects with prior to the year 2027, we have more descriptive details about the extent of the project, how many improvements it will have, things like that. But beyond that, these are a lot of conceptual projects. So it might have something in general that says road widening. That widening might in the future include an active transportation sidewalk, shared use path. We don't know that at this time. We're just taking what the county identified as a need and put that in the plan. So these descriptions will become more robust over time. And as the project year comes closer to fruition, we'll get more information about specifics. So a lot of the times, a lot of these lists have very general descriptions because it's a very conceptual idea at this point in time.
So this would have high interest to whoever from Stafford has Onville Road. That, for example, so you key in on this one.
Another one, a comment on VRE. So there is a section on transit in here saying that it's extremely limited and that they would like to see implementation. So I guess they need funding for special times other than just during regular commuter hours. Also, that person was concerned about providing equal access and investing in upgrading and providing equal access for those who are disadvantaged and are often left out of priorities when it comes to transportation because many rely on public transportation and we oftentimes invest in, roadways and things that single occupancy vehicle drivers will benefit from versus public transit.
The same lady. that wrote
Yeah,
the letter.
yeah, we gotta ask her to become on the CTAC.
Thought just went through my mind on that too. She got people.
So, well, I'm sorry.
That's okay. She highlights that it's important, especially with the new veteran hospital coming in. Let's see. Yep. So another commenter mentioned that the plan, as they interpret it, now granted, a member of the public with limited knowledge, it's hard to grasp the total impacts of this, but they thought that it was missing the correction to dispersing traffic going east to west. They thought that it's a half-hearted attempt to solve the problem and not the real issues. They applaud the sidewalks and trails, but also say that it's kind of missing the traffic management aspect. And I think this is the last.
That's a congestion management problem, the way I saw it.
Congestion management.
It's a congestion management issue.
So on here under plan is the brand new interregional multimodal east-west study.
Yeah, there you go.
With 22, 27.
That's what it deals with.
Mr. Hollis.
Another one, Onville Road again. So the county must recognize the fact that the majority of the foot traffic along Onville Road are bike strollers, kids, groups of people, and so on. So the sidewalk should be wider than just a standard sidewalk. They also want to make sure that the county is aware as they develop the project that it should go to the apartments off of Ebenezer Church Road. So folks who often transverse that area have a safe sidewalk to use. And then the very next one really echoes that. It's from a different person, and they're basically saying the same one. They're saying that there's a certain section that is low-income housing and apartments along the route, and that includes citizens with poor or no transportation means. So again, just kind of reiterating, it's important for that sidewalk project to go through, and it should be extended all the way down to that complex. And
I use that road every day when I'm working at Quantico, but I've been working at home. But when I do use it, that's exactly what I see, same thing.
Another one just commenting on traffic in the region. They want to have another way to cross over the Rappahannock, and they don't see that in this plan. Another comment saying that we need another route other than Route 195 going north and south, so an alternative needs to move north and south. And another comment saying we need another bridge across the river, and they would like it to go in by the baseball field. And those are the summaries of the 9 comments. So that might, drop some thoughts or how to comment as you guys decide to review the list. And this is your opportunity to provide any kind of comments as a group to be forwarded on to the policy committee if you so choose. I'll turn it back over to the chairman. If the group doesn't come to any consensus on what kind of comments, you can always email them to us and they'll be included with public comments. So we will get your concerns before the technical advisory committee and then the policy committee before they decide to adopt this plan as is.
Well, as the citizens who put these in, what happens? Will they ever hear and say, hey, we got this, hey, got your input about another bridge crossing, however, that we're putting 3 additional lanes over, I mean, just factual, not, hey, we disagree, they even say, here's some facts that might.
Well, there is
do that?
a gentleman who has briefed this committee, it's been a while now, about an alternative.
Right, and that's the second down that rabbit trail.
Yeah.
But yeah, to reach out to.
Did he just go into
No, so everybody who submits a comment, I write back to them individually and say, thank you for your comment, we'll answer any questions. Jordan and I went at length answering the first comment or questions. And then I promise to follow up with them after the committee takes action, the policy committee, saying your comments were considered at the CTAC, at the technical advisory committee, at the policy committee. Let them know, and that's the tricky part, let them know how their comments were considered by the policy committee members before they made their final decision.
Can't ask for anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, is there a way to reconcile in this plan right here to kind of go through and highlight to say this matches up with your concerns in here, this ugly spreadsheet as you described to say, all right, this is actually in somewhere in it, or at least a component of it, yeah,
Kind
to,
of touches on it.
yeah,
In the
that's what
next
I'm
3 years.
wishing I had right now is and highlighted, just say, okay, here are the citizens reaching out, taking the time to figure out who to contact. So how do we match it up in here, or is it not here, but I think all of us, something in here resonates, the bridge,
Yeah.
one of the roads, so.
It varies. Some of the comments, some of the commenters really took time to come through this and they gave us the identifying, the UPC number, so we can correlate that way. A lot of them were saying that the project description, it might include longer sidewalks, but they don't know. So that'd be hard to identify, but if you need something like that, it probably wouldn't take staff too long to, highlight this are the ones that line up with these comments.
I think that would be helpful
Okay.
for me to say, look at from that perspective to say it's here or it's not. And where, with the status of it, that's what I would want to know if I were writing it. That would be the answer. And then also touch on the process of where it's going through.
So, and that came up last month as well, and it was the idea of the UPC number. And there is a website that was provided to us in an email after last week. You can actually look up, UPC 10550. That's more detailed. So I just want to say, I find this very difficult for me. So what I do is I focus, the ones that are out there in 3950. Okay. So yeah, that sounds important. But I don't try and compare Fredericksburg to anybody else's. I'm just kind of saying in Fredericksburg, this upcoming stuff makes sense. I'm going to focus on the stuff that we have some influence on because it's more near term relatively than the ones that are out, 40 years from now. It's just otherwise it can be overwhelming.
So are we commenting on the
Yes.
comments?
Oh, on the comments? Commenting on the
No.
comments?
I don't think we're doing that.
Or just commenting on the list?
We just skimmed over the public comments for the CLRP, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or LRTP. So I'm not clear whether we're still on that topic or not.
I mean, if someone has a pertinent comment on a particular, but we don't, particular comment there that triggers something that it's going to be actionable for us or something that's going to advise us in our, the idea of us doing, improving something, or
I think, are you saying,
action.
do we or do we not take any action on what we're seeing in those letters? Is that
I
what
guess
you're
that's a
saying?
good way of putting it. Thank you.
Yeah. That's why I.
Okay, so in regards that is an input to, say, Conville, and so that might trigger a comment specifically about this plan should have more about Onville Road or something that we would.
That triggers me to head out to Onville Road.
That's just one more input as
This
an
week.
individual representing citizens
That's right.
that we would use, and we'd use as many inputs as we can get, which is sometimes hard to do. So that is a direct input. It's specific to Spotsy or Stafford.
We've got we in Stafford, we have the letter. And the onus is on us to, if we want to, follow up with the person. Or at least become more familiar with what the detail is in that letter.
Just a point of clarity, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Family staff do not invent projects to follow this list. So we don't sit here and go, oh, where do we need a new road? This list comes directly from requests from your localities only. And from VRE and sometimes Fred. So Fred Bus or VRE or Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, Stafford, and in the case of the rural counties in Georgia and Caroline, they send us their list. We take that list and score it and try to prioritize it into this document in front of you. So us as FAMPO, we don't go around saying, oh, well, let's put another sidewalk and another whatever else. That is done by the localities requesting us to fund the project. So the requests get filtered and put into that list. So when the public comments, I mean, the obvious thing to do is to take the comments, perhaps match it up with a project that's currently on the list and send a letter to them jurisdiction and say, by the way, the public are commenting on Onville Road, here's their comment, so that the jurisdiction might want to modify that particular project to include a sidewalk or a bus stop or whatever is required. But us as staff, we can't take action on those letters because the projects are not owned by us. They're owned by the locality. We merely put them into a list with priorities, which we think are more or less important, which the policy committee then votes on to agree with or does not agree with the staff. But we don't create any of those projects or modify them. They're entirely owned by the jurisdiction that the project comes from.
True that, but there could be, there were 3 comments about putting another bridge over the Rappahannock. This body might have read that, just heard that, and I said, yeah, we agree, and we want to say that there isn't anything in there that talks about putting 3930 and 3950 another crossing over. So not an answer directly each individual, or there's not, you go down to the transportation, Fred stuff, and it doesn't talk about all these things. We just heard from a citizen about the disability and how we deal with the people who need that extra help. Maybe we make those kind of comments. I agree with you. We're not going to pick apart individual little, unless one looks really stupid or some concept. But we would identify this area of my county, for example, is just not addressed on here for some reason. It really should be. That's what I think we should do.
It's absolutely fine. Those comments you need to make to the policy committee because they can vote to change that list.
That's right. So there's 2 ways to do that. We have the opportunity to continue putting individually, go through this after the meeting, put in meetings until, what was the date? Inputs?
The policy committee meets on the 19th or 20th? 20th?
Like that.
Monday the 20th.
Yeah, so we could individually do it, or we could now, if there was something that fires us up enough as a body, we would say, okay, I want to take an action item that we want to make this comment on the draft project list of the policy committee. It's an action item from us, so.
I guess that's the question I have, is how into the weeds are we on CTAC going to be getting into this? Like where we start pulling off one thing and like, all right, I have questions about this and, maybe the funding schedules or something.
Right, you'd have a hard time getting the CTAC to agree with one little small thing that, on the list. It's just not practical. But every one of us as a citizen or just a CTAC member say, hey, I have a question, and then make our comments through the process. It's going to affect us.
Or if there's a big omission, like there's some big omission you feel should be included, you all agree on it. You then send a letter to the policy committee saying, hey, we all think you've forgotten this bike path. It's a crucial project. Please pay attention.
Over the years, we find that difficult to do because the things are so technical and there's so little information that we deal with, dig down into. And so we have a hard time. And many times, the road will say, no, let's not take any action. We don't have a position on it one way or the other. It's not important enough for us to actually, or within our lane to weigh in a smart way. So.
And to make it easier for you guys to review, and the wrap-up email that Stacy sends tomorrow, we can make sure we send an Excel version of this. So you don't have to get your little magnifying glass and try to read this huge list at the size font that it is. So we'll make sure to have that attached for easier convenience for you guys to review and maybe even filter by the locality or whatever you're most interested in looking for.
Is this sort of a homework item for us to bring back to the next meeting and to say like, okay, here are the things that I like.
We're gonna do it before the next meeting.
But a reminder that this list is an ongoing, the LRTC changes, so it didn't just start from a blank sheet. All this has been on, not all this, much of this has been for many years now, approved, discussed, prioritized, as Hollis said, and brought forward by the jurisdiction. So, yeah.
So we won't change that list by adding items onto it.
Right.
I think at least 12 months. But we can modify any item on that list by changing the length, adding a bike lane, adding some. In other words, we can modify an item that is already on the list. But we can't, in the next 12 months, go and change it again because those projects have to go to a thing called air quality conformity analysis, which is a federal requirement. And you can't publish that list in the LRTP until it's been vetted by the feds and agreed that it's not going to affect the air quality for environmental reasons. So for that, because it's such a complicated process, we don't change that list every couple of months.
You're telling me we can't change this next week?
You can change it next week.
No.
The policy committee, once they've approved that for air quality conformity, we can then only change little details of the project. So we can't actually add a project or remove a project for at least 12 months, because to get the feds back to come and do another air quality conformity analysis would be difficult, expensive, and protracted. So the idea is, before the policy committee meets, you need to make those kind of changes. Changes to details can be made at any stage because they're smaller. They're little tweaks, adjust, because they're not building these things yet. This is for 25 years. So we can always tweak the details of a particular project.
Is the year of expenditure something that you can tweak, or is that going to be more set in stone? Like, that's the process.
We've used time bands, and I think, Jordan, are they 7 years?
The first one is 7 years to cover the state document. The second one is 10 years, and the last one is 11 years. So the year of expenditure, we just picked the middle year of that time frame.
So we can adjust within those brackets. Like the first 7 years, we actually don't know, because remember, we don't yet have this money. It's money that we believe we're going to get. So when the money lands with us to actually spend, you can juggle those within those 7 years. You can move projects to the front or to the back of that queue. The following 10 years, you can do the same. So you can shuffle within those lists once the money actually arrives. And that's done through things like Smart Scale, which you just heard of.
So in addition then to the homework where you could make comments through the process, you could, in addition, if you wanted to, email your representative from Stafford, the district, and say, hey, I'm real concerned about this, and you're going to be on the policy committee, or, meet. And then in addition, your traffic planners. And then say, here's something. So as the plan develops and as it gets more specific, then they might have that in the back. Oh, yeah, we talked about that. That road needs to be extended a little bit further. So those kind of specific things. So what we really functionally can do, and at hand, is there anything anybody wants to discuss that really stands out, that this doesn't make sense to me, or this has been completely lost in this project, where we would then make a statement, we could make a statement that, hey, this doesn't make sense to us.
I would make a statement that I'm totally sympathetic to the writer who wanted to have VRE service on the weekends.
Right.
On the other end of that spectrum, I'm totally unsympathetic about people that want to build more bridges across the Rappahannock.
And that is, those two things are coupled. If we had more and better VRE service and better access to it through St. Peter bus lines, would we need another bridge over the Rappahannock? Exactly.
But what is that bridge, what is this bridge for? What road? Because you can't widen Route 1 from my understanding. You can't widen 95 because of what the state signed for HOV. So what, I don't understand the purpose of that.
Here's the thing that I think is glaring omission, is a way to dissipate traffic off of Route 1 and 95. Now, some people call that the east-west connector, I forget the term, but a crossing, similar to what Joe Brito talked about last time, that crosses the Rappahannock, dumps into Fredericksburg, so that all the people who need to get to Fredericksburg or in and around Stafford don't have to clog Route 1 and 95. Now, it's not on the project list, if I understand it correctly. This is something I think we, from a regional perspective, need to advocate for. And we should tie in Spotsylvania, because they're going to have the same issue.
I think that's something that we tried in Spotsylvania.
We did. Well, I'll tell you what, then we get a bully pulpit, because there are thousands of drivers every day. And the commuter issue is going to go away in large scale because of the federal government doesn't know what it wants to do with working at home and all the rest of that. So you're going to have more people at home who need to shop when they're supposed to be teleworking, but their only option is 95 or up one, and we're legally limited to what we can do. So this is why the regional perspective is lacking. And if it means Spotsylvania shut it down, we get on the bully pulpit as a bunch of smart people who are looking out for the region. We work our contacts, we work our representatives, we work the public. I have no problem getting in front of anybody, I'll put on a suit, but telling them why a perspective that we share makes sense, whether or not their jurisdiction doesn't like it or is protective or whatever. I don't know what the reasons are, and I don't care. But this train has left the station and it's not on rails, it's on the roads.
Well, and one of the biggest concerns that I hear, and I live off of Brook Road in Stafford, is on the weekends.
Yeah,
I have neighbors that don't want to leave their house on Brook Road anymore because people are getting off 95, New York,
absolutely,
New Jersey,
and they're going down Brook
Pennsylvania,
Road and
going down
trying to
Brook
find
Road to get around back on the 95 once you get past Route 3.
I'm retired.
I don't
Where's
leave
that
my
at?
house on the
They're
weekend.
talking about the route, the widening on Route 2, that's vacation traffic getting
Yes.
rerouted from those apps, from
Yes.
the Waze apps, those roads you're seeing in New York.
Yep.
It's got
The
to
route,
work.
yeah,
So where's that in this?
It's
this
not.
plan?
Additional road.
So if I could just
It's not.
get a little clarity on this. In terms of the additional trains, additional week or new weekend trains, and reverse commuting, which is coming to work in Fredericksburg from, say, DC. All of those are part of VRE's long-term plan, and they bought out 50% of the track from CSX, and they're going to add another track, a parallel, so a third track.
So is that the issue that you had to cover as a
How-
man?
how-
Let me get a hold of this thing.
Well,
Is the issue more rail, like the comments about VRE, more VRE?
I mean, I can't say I know what the exact
Were you
answer
talking
is.
about that, or were you talking about rail, river crossing?
Yeah, I'm talking more river.
River crossing.
Where are we putting
I'm
it?
talking about the crossing and the ability to.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna interrupt, let me stop you here. Okay, so we're not talking about VRE, because that isn't a long-term plan to
Right.
do all that. If they could do all that, they would do it right now.
Yep.
They want to, as soon as they can, they want to bring the long bridge and all that other stuff. So
Gotcha.
that's why it's not on here, and it wouldn't be on here, because it's an operational thing rather than, so it's not, yeah, just. Now, if you're talking, if that's an issue that is big enough that we have this sense, that we agree with the concept that there should be on this plan somewhere, or we should try to put on this plan, something that addresses another road, another river crossing, then that would be kind of the action item we would take at this level. And so, there's been studied since 1995, I think, there's been multiple studies doing that, it's been turned out. So it's not like if people aren't aware of it, somebody's gonna go, oh yeah, that makes sense, and all the people who put this together are gonna know all those issues, and they've been dealing with it for decades. So, I don't think it would change anybody's mind, but if that was something we want to do, personally, I would. I mean, so if somebody wants to make a motion to that, could be considered by this board, because we're looking for an action item, we're not having an action, we don't have to have an action item. But we're not gonna go, hey, this is number,
Exactly.
Right, no.
I do have a question just related to this real quick, because maybe staff might be able to help with this, but I do remember that there was, I think you made mention to the study, and just like other studies like Lafayette Boulevard that kind of go into
There was a
Fredericksburg.
proposal, I went beyond the study.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Was there ever a preferred alternative that was chosen?
So there are two different projects coming on, Jim.
Yes.
So one was to build a thing called the Outer Connector or the Western Bypass.
Yes.
It was approved by the Commonwealth Transportation Board. Subsequent to that approval, Spotsylvania then, as a board, voted against it for reasons of battlefields and forest and natural environment and all that. At another point, this thing was voted on again, and that time Fredericksburg voted against it. So it's been difficult to get the three jurisdictions to all agree at the same time.
No,
It's
it's a good challenge for us.
No, I'm not opposing it, I'm just telling you the fact. Then there's Joe Brito, who's got a completely different alignment idea, which is not that project that the CTV voted for. It's very close to the I-95, parallel to the I-95. He wants to build a bridge from basically Celebrate Virginia North to Celebrate Virginia South, and he wants Spotsylvania to then carry it on with a route past the mall down into all the way to Harrison Road.
Yes.
So he's got a separate proposal. I'm hearing rumors, and don't quote me because it's a rumor, that the Stafford Board of Supervisors have been asked to put that particular item on their next board meeting agenda. Okay? However, none of that is in here,
Right,
because the three jurisdictions almost never, in fact, absolutely every time, never all three agree at the same time to do this project.
I understand.
So that's
That's
the
my
situation that we have.
we can approach this from a regional perspective, common sense.
That's what they used the last time.
I'm sorry.
That's how we got, that's why we rejected it the last time, common sense.
What's the common sense rationale for not, what's the basis for opposing it?
The idea, and the state of Virginia has come out several times in favor of it. Unfortunately, they don't give us the tools to do the job, but the idea is to make walkable, pedestrian-oriented communities the priority. It's on the books that they want to do it. But like I say, they just keep giving us, the only option is to put down more asphalt, paving our way out of congestion, which has never worked and it never will. So yes, this is more paving your way out of congestion, even on a grander scale, more congestion, creating more congestion in the future, because if you build it, they will come. And also increasing the pollution. And worst of all, or maybe not worst of all, the pollution might be worst, but also the cost. Because if we go with a transit-oriented development and get the congestion off the road by using congestion pricing, the tolls we get from the congestion pricing can pay for the transit, and we'll have a healthier community and very mobile community, and it'll encourage developers to build walkable, pedestrian-oriented communities.
And we won't have to do some of these
If
things.
somebody wants to go from Garrisonville Road to the Nat Stadium, I applaud them. Because that's what, 12 miles? God bless them if they're gonna put that. Okay, I don't argue with anything you've said, but there is the near-term reasonable, there's the midterm reasonable, and then there's the far-term ideal. And I think we could prioritize, come up with a common vision of what's doable, where we should emphasize. I mean, I'm all in favor of walking paths all over the place, but not at the expense of fixing some of the issues that everybody faces twice a day to commute, and every time they want to leave their house to go somewhere. So this is kind of where I'm coming from. And so I would like to make a motion that this board puts in front of the policy committee its concern of a lack of a region, east-west connector, whatever you want to do, that incorporates a third crossing over the Rappahannock River as a way of dissipating resident traffic off of 95 and Route 1 into other roads.
In other words, build your way out of congestion one more time.
There's a motion on the,
And I'll second.
we have a second.
Now you're in discussion.
Now you can have discussion.
Okay.
Are they mutually
Do
exclusive?
you need to say it one more time, or you think we got it?
Oh, God bless me. Okay. I would like this board to send a letter to the policy board expressing its concern that there is missing a project that addresses traffic dissipation and a third crossing over the Rappahannock River so that residents of the region have a way to avoid 95. And I know that's different from what I said the first time, but I'm sure.
And I see what you're saying. I get it. But I'm telling you, I've talked to plenty of my neighbors, people that, this house has been on Brook Road for years. And the traffic is not just the people that live in the community. It's people that's passing from deep, going to Virginia Beach or whatever. And if one thing happens on 95 or one thing happened on Route 1, or my goodness, if it happens on both of them, I mean, it's a mess around.
I want to
And
get
it's
those
been that way for
birds out
years.
of our way and then allow the rest of us to actually do what we need to do.
Yeah, it's hard to travel around here.
I
We
think, I
live-
don't think that it's mutually exclusive to say that you have 95 is being used as a local route and Route 1, and the bottleneck that we see at 17 coming from down to Falmouth Light, which is the only path to get back over to Central Park and Spotsylvania, is not mutually exclusive to reach those goals of walkable communities. That I don't think it's one or the other. I think
You know, this solution is not sustainable. What's sustainable, if you want to be able to get around faster, is to put into effect congestion pricing to get rid of the congestion.
Now, that is not, that may be an idea, but that would never be approved by any locality.
No.
I'm not saying whether it's popular or not, I'm telling you what's best.
Well, regardless, what you want is a way, you want a mass transit alternative because that vastly increases the throughput of the existing streets. And you want incentive for people to use that instead of their cars. And congestion pricing is one kind of incentive. And if that won't pass, you need another kind of incentive. But even before we can really talk about whether we need a crossing or not, is this list, was this, and I know they're responding to requests by the localities, which are kind of operating separately from one another. But is there any kind of transit model that says, you know, with the new trains running, if we increase the freight bus service, then that changes this list somehow? Or is this just kind of the list of everything that got requested that we think we can actually fund? Is that, I mean,
This is the list of everything that was requested, everything we can find. There's no modeling done on
Okay.
this list.
okay,
But it will be.
sure.
Yeah, we used to.
It's just, I don't know if we can make any meaningful statements about whether or not we need a new project for a crossing or anything like that until we know what the dynamic effects of additional mass transit that's already being funded in a separate stream are. I mean, maybe a crossing is a great idea even with the additional trains, but until we know what that impact is, we can't make any meaningful statements.
Is your motion basically asking for the inclusion of another study? Because the most recent preferred alternative was rejected by the local.
One at a time.
I don't know, it was a few years ago.
Yeah, but like I said, at one time staff from Fredericksburg was for it, and Spotsylvania wasn't.
Yeah, I
So,
remember Spotsylvania said no. I remember
Yes.
there's another alternative that sent out to Lake of the Woods.
so it's been studied. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
they
It's been
have,
studied.
you
So
know,
they didn't like the preferred alternative
Right.
that came out of the study.
Right.
So they're not going to agree with that necessarily. But, you know, it kind of puts the onus on them to like, okay, well, what will you agree with?
Right.
So that's what my clarification was. Are you asking for another study?
So
That's it
here,
right there.
this is it, and you can't see it because it's too small, I can pass it around. But Matthew did this for me, that Matthew over there. This represents every possible alternative route that has been suggested, voted on, agreed to, voted against, withdrawn, changed, whatever, over the past 25 years to do what you're talking about, building an outer connector or a river crossing. The only one that's not on here is Joe Greedo's one, because it's in a different place. It's not quite in the same place. So it's been studied to death. We put it on the list for the East-West study to be studied, and the three jurisdictions are not wildly enthusiastic about it at the moment, I can tell you. They said to us, put it as a priority 2 or 3. It's not a priority 1 concern for us.
I'm curious, what is priority? Let's train more cars to the 95, which cannot legally be widened.
So the 2 bridges that are currently being built
They're for toll traffic.
No, the toll ends before then. Those bridges are, what I got from VDOT and from the other side of Tampa, Logger, to avoid building the bridge river crossing that the CTV voted for. And because Spotsylvania blocked it, voted against it, it was decided in conjunction with VDOT to build 2 additional bridges in the middle of the I-95. And the idea is that 2 of the bridges are supposed to serve the local traffic, and 2 of the bridges are supposed to serve the through traffic that goes to Norfolk and Richmond and all that sort of jazz. Whether the implementation is done well is another matter, because I have a concern about how you cross those lanes. It's problematic. But anyway, that was the compromise, was to build those that are currently being erected. The southbound one is just about complete. I think the northbound one is going to be built next.
So are you saying that the toll lanes will stop at the Rappahannock period? And so the plan to extend them all the way down to Massaponax is a big gap because there's no toll connector.
Yeah.
So I think I'd like to hear a briefing from some responsible person as to what is actually involved in that. So because I've heard different versions.
VDOT's briefed it several.
But my motion is still to express concern that we're not addressing that issue.
And I second that. I mean, it doesn't hurt to like, put it on,
Because you know, if you go to your constituents and say, you know what you're experiencing on a daily basis, we're gonna throw up our hands, tough luck. That's not an acceptable option when there are alternatives available to us.
Has everybody had the chance to express their, and not reiterate their position, to express their position, ask a question?
Anybody online?
Yeah, especially online, anybody we haven't heard from? Thing to add?
Who is online right now?
Not ready to call for a vote.
Yeah.
Who's online?
Neil's here from Spotsy, y'all.
Glenn's here from Stafford.
There you go.
Can I reread before they vote to make sure I got that right?
Yeah, of course, we'll have a recording of it.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
The idea of expressing our response, it should be on there.
Yes, yeah.
And it will be eventually, that be a study, obviously, we get the specifics. And this, you know, the policy committee could say, yeah, it makes sense. You know, down here, 39.50, yeah. Should
Look,
work.
hey, Dave, this is Neil. Look, I got one thing to say about this motion right now. One, the gentleman to your left, and I apologize, I can see you on the camera, but I can't remember your name. But if you're gonna make the motion and then the gentleman next to Rupert's gonna second it, I think you guys can draft something up and put something on the next agenda for all of us to look at as an advisory committee to consider, take as an action item, and then push forward if you want to the committee, policy or otherwise. But the gist of what I'm looking at over the last 45 minutes and kind of dwelling on this agenda topic, there are 4 projects for Brook Road on this LRTP. There are 3 I-95 Rappahannock River crossings, probably very close to the Rappahannock River Bridge associated with all the collector distributor lanes. There are, I think, 4 Onville Road projects associated with widening it past Ebenezer Church Road. I would imagine if we went to whatever those projects are at VDOT right now, in whatever state they're in, and looked at them, there would probably be associated sidewalk enhancements, all of the other things that we're talking about here. There's an east-west mobility study that Ian, I believe, has put in place when he came on board at FAMPO to look at that again, that is being considered and maybe not done yet, but I think we're going to get briefed on that here on the next action item. I think all of this is getting handled. What you're looking at in these LRTPs, what you're looking at in these comments are people, you know, that are addressing issues that they have. I assume, Stacy, these aren't the full amount of comments that you got from everything. So is it possible that these comments get submitted to Chair McLaughlin with the policy committee? He throws them around. Maybe they do the same look. Maybe we help him look at some of these specific projects to see if they already address some of these issues, and then move forward from there in regards to what's feasible. Because I'm going to guess, you know, the east-west mobility stuff that Ian just showed, the cross connector stuff, 5, 6, 7 miles down the way, either way, Joe Brito's project, have all been considered, and there's a feasibility thing that probably gets run through VDOT and maybe the technical committee, where it doesn't make the list for all of those reasons we haven't seen. Maybe they should tell us what they are, and they're probably public record somewhere, and then just move forward from there in regards to what's actually going to happen. And Rupert, to your credit, yes, congestion pricing is a great idea. I don't think you can put congestion prices all over the entire region between Fredericksburg, Stafford, and Spotsy, but you can certainly look at it at downtown Fredericksburg, certain other corridors at certain times, maybe. To the gentleman's left of Dave there with the long-term plan, an ideal is probably closer to that than near-term congestion, from a full perspective and really enhancing that for the entire region. But in that time frame, you're going to get all these other projects that are supposed to improve. And I get it, right? We're already behind the 8 ball because it's just more pavement on top of pavement. But you can split a lot of these up jurisdictionally and still have significant improvements in those regions. And all to the credit of, 20 or 30 years down the road, none of us really know. VDOT doesn't know, FAMPO doesn't know what home telework is going to look like, automated cars, all of that stuff. And because we've got this transit stuff with Fred buses, the VRE, that's here now. We should fully take advantage of that from the commuter issues we have. And I think most of this is starting to do that. And I'll shut up, sorry.
That's a good learner.
That doesn't change that does not sway you to take the motion on the floor.
No.
Okay, so the motion is still on the floor. And the other things that you talked about, Neil, about making inputs and everything, which is what we talked about, doing it through the process, talking to your locality transportation planners, and then your representative on the PC. And so you can talk about all those other things that are the more detailed things that you mentioned. But that motion is still on the floor. If anyone wants to talk to this motion, for or against the motion, that's where we are.
I think we're ready.
So you got some additional to say that?
Yes.
Okay.
Looks like we're trying to do a quick fix to a problem that's been going on for like 70 years now. That started in the 50s with the change of transportation policy back then. Basically, I was suggesting we change it back. And because that was a mistake. Matter of fact, every planner that I've ever talked to was agreed that it was a mistake. At the time that we started down this path, the planners back in the 50s said it was a mistake. And they've been proven right because we've got the sprawl, we've got congestion, we're wasting energy, we're wasting time. And it never would have happened if we stuck to a transit-based system instead of an individual car, single occupant driver system. So it's true. The solution is not going to be quick because the problem took like 70 years to get here. It might take us 70 years or 170, I don't know, to work our way to back where we should be. But it is the right thing to do. But if it's more important to you to get quickly to Central Park than it is to save money and to save the planet, that's your entitled.
You're not going to use Fred to go grocery shopping because you can't carry stuff on Fred. You're not going to use the VRE to go shopping because the VRE doesn't service all of the things we as a society do. My motion says this is something that we're concerned about that you need to address. There'll be plenty of time for people to jump in and say, well, we should emphasize this, we should de-emphasize that. I get it. But nowhere on this plan does it appear that we are stating or they are actively planning for some solution to what we're experiencing on a daily basis. So the motion is to say, we have concerns and you need to put this back in your radar screen and start looking at it because all localities may have rejected it years ago, but the populations have changed. When I moved to Stafford, there were 80,000 people in the county. There are 158,392 now. And Spotsylvania may have been a Sleepy Hollow, but it has changed. In Fredericksburg, it has changed.
Any other inputs to this subject? Any opinion? All right.
I'm going to have to correct one thing. If you're wrong, road shopping, for example, my mother never owned a car. She did shopping just fine. And plenty of people were in the same boat. And with enough time to correct this problem, we will have communities growing that are closer together and walkable, and we can do it again. But we'll never do it again if we go down the path that you're suggesting.
Okay, all in favor of this motion? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Aye.
7.
Another aye, that's 7.
Chair vote.
Okay, anybody opposed?
Neil H.
2, 3.
Four are opposed.
3 here and 1 online.
7 were in favor, 4 are opposed. Okay, so we will write up that and we will present, get it to the PC in time so that they have that as our input, so the CTAC is concerned about that. The actual wording, I guess we should get to Henry and so they can make sure it's right.
I think if you can basically capture the 2 versions.
Yeah, and we've got a report, so I should agree with this, so, okay.
I'm very
Maybe we should get the draft and bring it back to the next meeting.
That misses the meeting.
That's the problem.
We missed the PC meeting.
That's what Neil started out saying, but
Yeah.
it's not timely. It doesn't mean this has to go to PC before.
PC is 20th. 20th.
We're trying to get in
This
on,
month.
or we can get in on the next cycle, and it seems only fair for the entire group to agree on the wording of the letter before it gets sent off. So
We
bring
can,
it,
we can do that.
should bring it back next
via
month.
Email.
Bring it back next month and then vote on whether it's correct or not.
You can do it via email. We voted by email.
The tenets of the motion are very straightforward. What you want to argue, happy to glad is okay. We're expressing our concern that we note there is no policy study or no study on this plan that addresses a third crossing over the Rappahannock River and the means to dissipate congestion that currently consumes Route 1 and I-95. That's not the third iteration. Does anybody have any violent objection to anything I just said? Yeah, I think it needs, as the vote indicated, needs to go to the policy committee.
Approved 74. Okay, and then also do your homework on other things in within your lane specifically. You don't have to say really, but I mean, that's, you're more likely to have better knowledge about things in your lane. So I'm not trying to, you comment on anything on it. Just as citizens have done. All right, that was great. It's good discussion because we, as a CTAC, we launched onto an item that we have some passion about. So good. I think. All right, now we've got lost in the paperwork.
7C.
Okay. This kind of ties in because this will get down to the specifics of things that people know about that they want to. So, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So one of the things we've been working with our bicycle pedestrian advisory committee on is figuring out ways in how we can better understand and find some of the bicycle pedestrian issues within our region. So we've started basically online map and working with our bicycle pedestrian committee to find areas that we may not know about that need improvements or fixes or reconstruction or whatnot. So crossing improvements, infrastructure gaps, infrastructure repair, crossing upgrades, new infrastructures, things like that. So this map is a work in progress. This just came out at our last BPAC meeting. And so then we're working with staff internally to find out how best we can use this with our committees, BPAC and CPAC. And basically what we'll be looking to do with this is in future committee meetings or future allow use for public or you guys to go into this application and put down places where you are seeing bicycle and pedestrian issues, active transportation issues that need fixing, that need upgrading, that maybe we don't know about, or that planners in your localities don't know about, because this is a citizen meeting, of course, but our BPAC has representatives from our localities, as planners from Stafford County, Spotsylvania County, the city of Fredericksburg, who we can make aware of some of the issues. So really just wanted to show this application to you guys as something we're working on in the future. And I think in lieu of some time constraints tonight, perhaps next meeting, we can come back with, we're continuing to work on this application. And maybe next meeting have some further discussion on it with how we can use this to better find active transportation issues. You can see some of the things our BPAC put on there and kind of a first iteration of how this can be used. So it basically sidewalk improvements near Legals Road on Spotsylvania Parkway, some crossing improvements at Route 3, and I guess this is the town center, some crossing improvements And one of the things our BTAC mentioned, or their CTAC maybe 6 months ago, was cross improvements at the roundabout down at Fall Hill and Mary Washington Boulevard. So added that here. So things like that. Just wanted to show you this. This is something we're working on, and potentially in some of the discussions we've had tonight can help with how we can work with our citizens to better inform planners, inform decision-making process.
Cool. That's what you do.
Matthew, this is Neil from Spotsy. You got a second?
Yeah.
Is the idea is this interactive exercise is just for us in the action committee, in the advisory committee here? Or is it for citizens to kind of come and mark up this tool either online at a FAMPA website? What's your thinking there?
At a later date, definitely, or not definitely, possibly having it more open to the public and having access. But I and Terry Barber, our transportation bike ped planner, we'll be working further on that with our bike ped committee. So this is their bicycle pedestrian advisory committee, kind of however they want to proceed with this is how we will proceed with this.
Okay, so it's internal for now, right? Would it be smart for you all to consider and maybe take this as a note or something, where there are existing pedestrian walkways, pathways, bike routes, all that stuff, to build out from there, from those central spots? Like I know you've got that RCH trail or whatever, BCR tree, RC trail or whatever, and move that. And I know the plans are all in place to kind of extend those from certain ends and stuff. If there are other places like that, wouldn't it make sense to build out from those and connect everything up, which I think has kind of been the philosophy, strategy for the area? Is that kind of how you guys are taking it? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that BFAC talked about is adding a bunch of layers onto this to say, here's where Stafford County's bike ped amenities, where they want to build in the future. Here's where the current bike ped amenities are. What is missing? What needs to be different from what's on this map? Things like that. So we'll work with our localities to kind of further expand this. This was just a little bit of informational. This map and these layers was about a 5-minute exercise that Carrie and I did to put together for our BPAC. This is just a start. I wanted to show you guys, of course, get comments, opinions, if you have anything for how we can use it in the future. And of course, in the future, further expand upon this to help with our kind of advisory roles of our committees.
I mean, if people doing, for example, a STAR study for Route 3 or something, I don't know where we have that, but maybe they could use that to help get input on their specific part of each of them. That's cool. Yeah, thank you, Matt. That's great. Okay, nomination election officers. We are still overdue for having an election. We don't have anyone for Spotsylvania who is next in line. I don't know if you know what we do, but like it rotates with community in a set pattern. So Spotsylvania is basically kick the can. That means that Stafford should be the next to, hopefully would be president. Has there been any change from Stafford?
I'll volunteer for the position.
Good. I thought that might. Well, this will be pretty straightforward. Is there anyone else from Stafford who's interested in being the chairman?
Don't hold you up in front of me.
Okay, I'm here. Go ahead.
I move that we postpone this item to the next meeting.
Oh, okay, there's a motion on the table to postpone this. Hearing no second, the motion dies. So there's only one candidate next in line, which is the, would be Spotsylvania, but they're not doing it, so it'd be Stafford. So all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. Welcome, Chairman. Okay, now we can then have a vice chair, which would be Fredericksburg then. Rotate around. So is there anybody from Fredericksburg?
Yeah.
Like to self-nominate. Anybody else? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All against? None. All right, cool. Yay. I'll help.
Vote for you.
Believe me, I'll be very helpful in any way I can. I really mean it because it, you know, Dave was very helpful to me. Yeah. So
I'd like to make a motion congratulate you and thank you. I know I'm a newcomer, but to do this for the length of time you have is remarkable in of itself. So I move that we officially appreciate your service to.
Second that.
All in favor?
All right, you're looking for the opposed, not in.
All right, let's see. Oh, we got any other, okay, is there anybody, public comments made at this point in our discussion? Okay. Hearing none, close the public comment. Correspondence, please.
Yeah, nothing really to discuss here. I just added some links on your agenda packet that might be of interest. The first one is the city put out their final version of the small area plan for the area around Celebrate, Virginia, the Central Park area there by the baseball field. That might give interest to you. They do have a lot of transportation changes proposed and trails. The second item of correspondence is the George Washington Regional Commission. So for those of you who are new and still trying to wrap your head around this, the George Washington Regional Commission is housed in this building. FAMPO, you can kind of sort of say is under the umbrella of GWRC. If I said that to the policy, there'd probably be an argument. But just to simplify it there, so GWRC is doing this survey on trails. So it's not FAMPO doing it, it's GWRC because it encompasses areas other than the FAMPO localities of Stafford, Spotsylvania, Fredericksburg. Right. So go ahead and take that trail survey, give them your feedback for trying to develop a more connected regional trail system. Do you want me to just keep going the next item?
Please.
Okay. CTAC member changes. We have 3 new members. Patricia Encarnacion for the city of Fredericksburg, Henry Sharpenberg, Stafford County, Rodney Thomas, at-large representative. We did lose one CTAC member. Wade was from Stafford County? No. City?
No,
Stafford County. Yeah, he had a job commitment that takes him further north, so we appreciate his service to the committee and we will miss him. Currently, there are still open seats. I'm going to just run through them real quick. If you hear your locality or you're an at-large member, please reach out and encourage somebody that you might know to get some more information about becoming a CTAC member. So there's 2 open at-large seats, 2 open seats for the city of Fredericksburg, 6 open seats for Spotsylvania County. I know Neil online has been trying to find some people interested. Stafford County has 3 open seats. Caroline County has no open seats. King George County has 2 open seats. And did I skip over?
And that's on the FAMPO page if you need to refer back to it. It's always updated, our membership and then our vacancies.
Oh, I think I skipped, yeah, I skipped over. I skipped over Ian, sorry. Your presentation.
In view of the time, I'm going to fly through this faster than you would like, but I would just ask to give an overview of projects that we're working on. So Matt, if you can just go straight through the next slide. We have a rural work program which deals with our rural counties in GWRC, which is King George, which are King George and Caroline. In 2020, we completed the thing that you've got there with all the projects on for FAMPO. We completed a long-range transportation plan for the rural areas because the federal authorities requested that FAMPO divide the long-range transportation plan into a FAMPO urban long-range transportation plan and a rural long-range transportation plan because the funding sources are different, the oversight is different, and they wanted them. So we created a rural long-range transportation plan. 2021, we are busy with the King George Transportation Needs Study. Effectively, that is a study looking at the possibility of reintroducing the freight transit system to the King George County. The county supervisors have asked us to do that. It's almost complete. In 2021, we completed the Bowling Green small area That plan resulted in a small scale application that now resulted in a project with pedestrian work in Bowling Green, and it was a successful small scale application. We're currently busy with the Ladysmith small area bicycle and pedestrian plan. It's just at the beginning stages at this stage. Next slide. The East-West mobility study, we began this already in July. We had the first stakeholder meeting, and you had a representative or two from this body on the East-West mobility study. There are the dates of the future meetings. The study has two phases. The first phase is largely focusing on transit and bicycle and pedestrian access to transit. The second phase is focusing on roadways, including some of the projects you can talk about tonight, as well as bike and pedestrians generally, bike paths, sidewalks, and so on. And then the route engineering for whatever projects are recommended in the study across all modes. So if we decide we want a bus rapid transit route, you have to get roadway, lane space, and engineer all of that. So there's a link on the website where you can read about the project as it develops. The Lafayette study you heard about earlier is basically complete. We're getting the final presentation, well, the draft presentation in September to the TAC and the policy committee, etc., and then in October the final presentation. These are the basic recommendations that are coming out of that study. 4 intersections on the street which are going to be upgraded with turning lanes, with intersection configurations as at those particular intersections. Long term, there's a widening proposal for section of Lafayette Boulevard and a VRE connector road, which you don't see on this map, but the aim is to connect from, what's the street called?
Route 3 at Dixon Street.
Dixon Street, around the back into the VRE parking lot, which is across the street from this building. So how to get in there? There's a recommendation from the Lafayette study to build an access route to the parking lot of VRE. Next slide. Just to give you an idea of what's going on, your localities and FAMPO are doing all of these studies, except for a bunch, which are these pipeline studies that VDOT is doing in our area. So all of these things are either currently ongoing or about to start. And you can see my job, one of the most difficult parts of my job, is to make sure these things don't clash. Because if any one of these studies contradicts another one, we're not going to get funding. So I got to run around and attend these things to make sure that every one of these studies and the consultants that are doing it keep in the same line so that we get projects that we can, that are bankable, that we can then build, whether it's a bus route, a train line, a river crossing, whatever the project is. You can see there's a vast amount of projects on the go just to build usable projects that would then get put onto this slide. Next slide. Just in terms of the census, these are the percentage changes of the population in all of our jurisdictions, so you can just get a rough idea. Stafford is growing the fastest of all of our jurisdictions, followed by the city of Fredericksburg, followed closely behind by Spotsylvania. The interesting one for me is King George County. It's only growing 1% slower than Spotsylvania. King George County is going to become a much bigger county in terms of population size in the future. It's growing very quickly relative to what you might expect. Just the total population in 2020, according to the census of FAMPO and of GWRC, there you can see the numbers. That's just from the Washington Post, I beg your pardon. The purple is the new development over the last 2 decades. Where is it happening? You can see Fredericksburg in the center there. You can see where the purple is. Effectively, you've got an urban conurbation of here in the center, plus North Stafford. These two will slowly grow together by the looks of things, and then you're going to have one basic conurbation over here with spots out in King George and down south on Route 1. That's what's happening on the ground. I don't know whether you know anything about our CMAQ SDG funding. When those projects on that long list need to get funded, we then look to the funding streams that we get from the feds, from the state, and from the localities. One of those packs of funding is called CMAQ, Congestion, Mitigation, and Air Quality Funding, and what's STDG stand for?
Surface transportation.
Block groups funding, block grants funding. So those two sets of funding represents a large chunk of money that we get as FAMPO. And when we get that money, we then apply it to the things that are on that list. And a lot of fighting and hissing, and everybody eventually agrees which the ones are going to be. So our methodology for doing that, coming up with a draft list, is very out of date. It's more than 10 years out of date. It precedes my predecessor. So it's very out of date. And it's very unclear in many cases how exactly to apply the methodology. As they say, it's so wide you can drive a bus through it. So there's often a fight when we have produced a list because it's a very bad methodology. It doesn't tell you what any of the terms in the process mean. So we've decided that what we have to do is redo that prioritization methodology so that it's less fighting at the end, because we've agreed what should happen. And so we're going to update it, and there's just a timeline for you as to how we're going to update that methodology, and you'll get presentations over the course of the next 6 months as to how we do it, where we are with each step, and we hope to then have called projects again, which will probably come off of that list to fund, because we have got some money sitting which we haven't allocated, and we haven't allocated it because there was too much fighting and hissing last time. So this, we hope, will solve that problem by using some objective metrics to try and produce a prioritized list of what's more important, what's less important, and this methodology will help us do that. We've got a chunk of money sitting that we need to allocate, and we can't allocate it because people will not agree. We're hoping that this will fix the problem. Just last two things. FAMPO, when I arrived here, did not have the ability to issue task orders and contractual work to consultants, because all of the contracts were stale and had lapsed. So I set about a process to replace all of those. And I'm happy to report that both the FAMPO board and the GWRC board have given us a notice to proceed to sign the contracts after a 5-month process of getting proposals, interviews, scoring, and a whole bunch of things. And the 3 companies which we're appointing are Michael Baker, VHB, and Cambridge Systematics. And we're in the process now of getting them all to come and sign their documents. So thankfully, as soon as they've signed, we will be able to then issue work to consultants again. We haven't been able to do that for 12 months because we don't have contracts. I fixed it. And apart from also hiring staff, which I've been working on to make sure that FAMPO is in a position to do better work and more work, because we've been short-staffed and we've had no consultants on call. All the work we've been doing on the Lafayette study is based on contracts that are 5 years old and had expired. So we wouldn't be able to continue that work. And also, this is something you may want to think about as a committee, Mr. New Chairman and Vice Chairman. The Commonwealth Transportation Board has engagements with the public and with us twice a year, in the spring and in the fall. The spring one arrived when I just kind of sat down on my feet at FAMPO, and I had to grab whatever projects FAMPO had already been pushing for and just take those to the CTB. But in the fall, I'd like it to be a little more organized. So if you believe passionately about an individual thing that we need, it's typically the bigger things. We don't mess with, an intersection that we want fixed. We don't harass the Secretary for Transportation about a local intersection. We typically would take big concerns, big problems, and raise them during this period in the fall. It'll probably be around the beginning of November. But my offer is to the 4 FAMPO committees to please email me particular things you're concerned about, and then I will make up a short list and present it in the next month to the FAMPO committees to get some agreement that those are the things that we're concerned about, so that when we go to this board and to the Secretary for Transportation in the fall meeting, it's a more carefully thought through process. We spend some time thinking about the problems, and we take the things, we raise the things in those meetings which we're really passionate about. Of course, they're public meetings, so you can all go and raise your own issues as well. But I try to get the top 2 or 3 things that FAMPO is most concerned about. That's all I have to say. If you have any questions, but know time's late, so I didn't want to delay it.
Really like those updates.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Very helpful. Okay, member reports.
Oh, upcoming CTAC presentations.
Oh, right, okay, so these are two things that they've been in the mail, and they've been in the news lately, and so we're gonna we tentatively scheduled that we're gonna have, in October, we'll have the Spotsy bond referendum. What's in there, kind of thing, you've seen it, hopefully you've seen it in the newspaper, the kind of things are in there. It's just a bond referendum, doesn't mean they're funded, which it'll help, hopefully it'll help you, especially in Spotsy too, when you're talking to citizens about, hey, what's in here, what's not in there, and what's it really mean, so. And then the whole thing about the Leland Road bike and pedestrian project in Stafford County, where there's this beautiful little trail, I guess it's only 6 feet wide, and all that. There's a lot of citizens input, not through us, but a lot of citizens input, and so I think we got some new thoughts and on that presents, which would be really helpful for all of us to hear. So that's why I suggested we put those on but that would be up to you, actually. But I suggested they would be of interest.
I heard about an hour of citizen input on that yesterday.
Oh, did you? Okay, all right, yeah. Good. Member reports. Any members keep present have any report? Okay. Anybody online, a member has a report?
Move adjournment.
Move to adjournment.
Second.
Nothing to report at this time.
All in favor? Don't forget, you're on your own. Thank you, everybody. I knew that's what they were talking, they were going to start Oh, absolutely.
I'm sure you're gonna have more.
Working.
Yeah.
That was good to hear, Glenn.